Have you ever asked yourself, what in the world is my dispatcher thinking? Well, on today's episode of Driven Too Far, we're going to talk about a day in the life of dispatch. Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler with Chief Carriers, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family. Welcome back to Driven Too Far. You know, when we started this podcast nearly 2.5 years ago, one of the things we promised to do was pull back the curtain so you could see what goes on behind the scenes at a trucking company. And today we're going to talk about dispatch. I've brought in one of our longtime operations dispatchers. John's wore a lot of different hats, but let me introduce you to John Steffes. Got 25 plus years in the business. He's worn a lot of different hats over the years, from dispatch to customer service to broker, the B word.
Yep.
Yeah, that might be an interesting. So anyways, welcome to Driven Too Far, John.
Thank you.
So John, you know, when you think about things through a driver's eyes, they see dispatch probably in a different light. But what I want to do is let's paint a picture. Tell us about what a typical day looks like in dispatch.
It can be a lot of different things. It can be a lot of chaos. You have to expect the unexpected every day. I know every day when I go into the office, I'm thinking, okay, here's a list of things in my head that I got to get done. And I walk in and I open up my computer and you're not doing those things to start.
Yeah.
And it will throw you off track.
Right.
So you have to be able to overcome that every single time, because it's going to happen more often than not.
With every phone call that comes in, It's a new problem, challenge, fire, whatever goes on. But that's absolutely right. And I know one of the frustrations of a driver is certainly, you know, the ability to get a hold of a dispatcher, right? They're calling in, they need something from you. God dang it, that dispatcher, I can't get a hold of anybody. What's going on? Well, what are you busy doing?
What they sometimes they don't really understand is we're probably already dealing with some other issue that's going on.
Yep.
And the hard thing is to explain to them and help them understand is they think that their issue is probably one of the biggest issues that you should be working on, and it is, because every issue is big. So, but you've got to learn how to tackle them in order and get them rolling again.
Yeah, right. And it's important. And he's right. You know, every problem's important. Every driver's just as important as the last, but it is a process. You know, like you say, you're busy from the time you walk in and fire up your computer in the morning. You may have even been getting messages before you got to the office, right? They start texting, emailing, sending you mobile comm stuff. So you're already thinking about the issues you got to tackle when you walk in the door. So unfortunately, for dispatch, it's overwhelming sometimes, the amount of things that you have to juggle in a day.
Yes, it is. Because on top of all that, you're still looking for loads for those drivers, making sure that all of their information is updated in the system so you can properly get them dispatched on the proper load for them. And in our situation, you're working with a lot of our different plants across the country. So you're also trying to manage everything that's at those plants and making sure that they're happy with everything, getting the freight into them, yet getting the freight out from there. So sometimes the drivers, when you're explaining that to them when they come in the office, they're like, oh, wow. They're starting to understand a little bit more of the picture about what's truly involved. So sometimes you've got those drivers and trying to help them understand everything that's involved with your daily activities, as far as making sure that they're being taken care of. In our situation with our plants being taken care of, getting the material into them, yet getting it out of there. And then when you do explain that to those drivers, they kind of sit back and they go, whoa, there's a bigger picture there that they're not always seeing, but now they're understanding better.
Right. The driver doesn't always get to see what's happening behind the scenes unless they're, you know, physically there. Obviously, if they're calling in on the phone or maybe using the, you know, the mobile comm in the truck and stuff, they don't get to see that stuff. But it is a balancing act, right, for you guys and stuff. And not only that, you're chasing information for the driver. You're trying to get them the information they need. But that means you got to have other people cooperating too. So if you're calling that receiver trying to get that delivery appointment, that doesn't mean they picked up, and you might be waiting on a call back.
Right.
So from a driver's perspective, and I'm trying to look at things through the driver lens, you know, God, what is this dispatcher doing? How much more clear can I be? I need this appointment, or I need this pickup number, whatever that looks like. But from your point of view, you've made those requests. Now you're waiting on them.
So there's a lot of waiting games. They feel like they're the ones that are always waiting, but they're waiting because probably we're waiting.
Yes. It's not dispatch ignoring you or not responding to your needs. And I do feel like, again, when the drivers, they're at a disadvantage because they can't see what's going on.
Right.
But I think all my years in the industry, I can promise you that dispatch is not ignoring you on purpose. They're not playing games, doing any of those things. They're likely waiting on a response from somebody else to get you the information you need.
And it's hard for them too to understand that because they're the ones that are out on the road. They're the ones that are sitting there. They're the ones that aren't being able to get down the road and start making money because we are always waiting on somebody else. It's always a cycle, and to try to put it all together is kind of what gets pretty hectic sometimes. But you make it work out in the end, and you get a smile from them. You did pretty well.
Right. So let me ask you this. What is, from a dispatch perspective and a lot of the different hats you've worn over the years, what is some or one of the biggest frustrating things that happens during the day for you? Is there one thing that kind of stands out that just drives you crazy?
Communication.
Okay.
I've stressed it over the years many times. You've got to have that communication. Communication has to start from the management down to the team, down to the drivers, down to the customers, out to everybody else. Because if you don't have that proper communication with everybody, then that chain just got broke and you're in trouble. Because you don't know, they don't know, and nobody knows what is going on.
So how do you think that falls through the cracks? What happens frequently?
I suppose somebody probably from time to time gets sidetracked, gets that phone call, gets that other email, and they go to do that specific thing, and they forgot about it because another thing came up and another thing came up. That's kind of the issue sometimes being in the office is there's always things that are coming up that are surprising you, that are delaying you from doing something. You've got to make it a priority to go back and make sure that you're getting all of those things done so that the communication cycle can start over again.
Made me think, from time to time, we're training new staff, driver managers, fleet managers, whatever it is. And that's absolutely one of the things we share with them during the training process is have a notepad next to on your desk, right? And write it down, even if it's just little notes to jot down, because I can guarantee you, you're going to get interrupted. You're going to forget where you're at, and you're going to need to go back to that notepad and go, oh yeah, I owe Joe a phone call back with his pickup number.
That's pretty funny that you bring that up because I actually have 3 of them on my desk because I work in different areas of my desk.
Yeah.
So when something comes up, I'm like, somebody will be yelling something up to me. I'm like, oh, hold on, write that down real quick. Go back, finish what I'm doing. Somebody else will yell something on the other side of the room, and I write that down. So that way they're always there in front of me. Because if you don't, and you think that you're just going to remember it, but don't remember where your notepad is, you're probably going to forget it.
So I'm gonna hit you with a good one because, again, I'm trying to think of things through the driver's eyes here. Be honest with me. How do dispatchers decide what loads a driver gets?
Are you thinking you favor them over me?
Yeah, I think that's a perception of a lot of us drivers out there is like, oh, so-and-so got the good load and he likes it better kind of thing. Yeah,
there's definitely a lot of that. We hear that quite a bit, but in all honesty, we don't have the time in the day to sit there and say, hey, I'm going to come to work and I'm going to list out my favorite drivers and I'm going to make a list of these good loads and then I'm going to try to figure out a way to put them together. You don't have time for that. You have to maximize the driver's hours. You have to maximize his home times or the requirements laid out by the shipper or the receiver, the amount of miles that go into that load. Does he have the time over the next day, 2 days, 3 days to get this load done? That's pretty much how you're going to prioritize what's best truly for the driver at that specific time, the load for that specific time, and everybody else that's involved with it at that specific time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that drivers have to keep in mind and remember too is that we have the same goal. While me as a driver, I'm focused on my paycheck for the week, right? The miles, however you're paid. You're also focused on revenue for the asset.
Yes.
So those two things align.
Yes, they do. That's when you can sit back and say, you knew you did the best thing for everybody that was involved. It's not just about you trying to dish off the load the quickest that you can to get rid of it. It's not about just the company, and it's not about just the driver. It's about everything to make it work.
Right. You're trying to figure out the best overall solution for
Yes.
everybody involved.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. What are the key factors? What is like maybe the process you go through when a driver's on the phone, he wants to book his next load? Is there a certain sequence of things that you think about while you're trying to figure out which loads you're going to offer them or put them on?
Honestly, you try to, and you hear it quite a bit from other people in the office, you hear about what it is that they're trying to get done. Where is that driver trying to get to? Is something going on that just popped up that he has to get back to a specific place? But really, you're just looking, here is what we have that's available. If they are truly demanding something different or really want to get somewhere different, then you have to kind of go out there and, obviously source out their load for something and try to get them to where they're going to. But it's really just about, the way I look at it is about maximizing everything for everybody. Because at the end of the day, that's how it's going to be made best. They're going to, well, I may not have the hours. No, if you do it, you're going to have the hours. They may struggle with that a little bit until payday comes. Then they're like, okay, I got pushed pretty good this week. Didn't think I could do it, but they knew I could.
They're liking that paycheck on Friday too.
Do.
Yeah.
Yes, they
yeah,
do.
that's definitely a thing for the drivers to maximize that check. It makes me think about, when you're juggling those things and all the things you have to keep in mind while you're trying to figure out which is the best load for that driver in that situation. We may call them maybe all the drivers are OTR drivers. On paper, they're kind of the same as far as the job description, but that couldn't be farther from the truth when you get to know these drivers as individuals.
Right.
Because Jim likes to go this direction and Joe likes to go that direction and Bill's got to get home and John needs his truck in the shop. And so you got to think all those things.
Yes, you do.
And figure out who's going to, match to what load.
One of the most important things really is you'd kind of mentioned, is get to know your driver.
Yeah.
You've got to know them. It's not like you have to be best friends and go out for coffee when they're back. But you have to get to know them at a personal level, because you're going to learn where they do or don't like to go, what hours they may get up and start working, or when they may stop working at the end of the day. And there's even times where we've got somebody who has a pretty good hot spot that he likes to go get his barbecue at.
Okay.
So if you can run that driver through those areas, it's amazing how much of a change you see in that driver when he learns those, when he knows that you know those things.
Yeah. One of the things that makes me think about, though, is sometimes you'll get a driver feeling like you're not offering me enough options or loads. Mm-hmm. But the reality might be that I know you. Mm-hmm. I know where you like to run, where you don't like to run. So I'm not going to waste your time offering you these 6 loads when I know you're going to say no anyway.
That's exactly right.
Or it doesn't fit, what you're trying to achieve this week as far as miles or something like that. I've got this one or this one. Which one do you want? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a good point for drivers to understand, is you're trying not to waste my time on the phone. Let's be as efficient as possible. I know you well enough. We've been working long enough together that I know you're not going to do these. I think you'll do these. What do you think?
Well, that's exactly right, because if you start trying to put them on loads that their areas that they're not going to go to, or their delivery times that they're not going to want, or whatever the case may be, and you say, okay, well, here's this load, they're going to call you up pretty quick on and say, hey, I don't like this, I don't like that. Like you say, that's why you're avoiding that waste of time to utilize their time better and yours.
Right.
So getting to know them is pretty key.
So I want to address the elephant in the room. You need to level with me. Are you playing favorites? You got your favorite driver. Am I one of those favorite drivers, or am I on the short end of the stick? Is that how that works? I know that's how that works.
No. That's not at all how it works. Some drivers might feel that just because of the miles that they've got, or maybe when they're in the office, they don't feel maybe as welcome as sometimes as somebody else that they might be seeing is talking to somebody. Well, that
drivers talk. What?
Yeah, that's not necessarily always the truth, because if we're in there talking to somebody, we're sure going to talk to you too. We're just in the middle of a conversation right now. There's no real favorites. You get to know each driver. You treat them the way, or talk to them the way that they know and want to be talked to or teased with or whatever the case may be. But when these guys come in and they say, hey, yeah, they like him better because they're always talking to him. No, he was just here 5 minutes before you, come on over. We're going to talk to you too, and they kind of put that together with the loads that they're getting, and they think, okay, now I know why this driver's getting all these miles. Well, the thing is it's pretty funny is sometimes you'll run the report and you'll say, you know what, you got those miles too. They just may not see it at that specific time. It might be the mood that they're in that day.
Well, it made me think of a story. Some of it's about perception, but this is years and years ago when I was actually dispatching. I remember a specific driver, good driver. His CB handle was Maytag. And why was it Maytag? Because he liked to agitate people. So he would do that kind of stuff on purpose,
right?
Just to get his buddy. He's like, "Oh, they only gave you that load? Well, I got the one that's 3,000 miles." And they're like, "What? I asked him for that, and he wouldn't give it to me. He likes you better." It wasn't true at all. He's just messing with him. Yeah. So, anyways, that stuff happens too.
It does. And the biggest thing to understand too with drivers, and we talk about it a lot, is you need to make them feel comfortable and at ease with everything that you're doing for them, because they have nothing but windshield time. And
right, they're at a disadvantage because they don't see what's going on all the time.
And all they have to do is to think about that one thing. So when they're not having to worry about anything over the road, they're a happy driver for you.
Yeah. I think one of the things I want to mention too was, it's not unusual for a driver to have a concern about their miles or the paycheck or something like that and come into dispatch, talk to the driver manager, talk to the operations manager, whatever that looks like. Hey, my miles are dropping or my miles aren't very good and stuff. And I can tell you from sitting in that seat for a lot of years, when you come and ask those questions or maybe even accuse, the first thing that you're going to do in the office is pull the data, right?
Right.
So one of the things that can happen and happens quite frequently, and we have a saying in dispatch is, I'm only as good as the last load I gave the driver. Meaning, if they love the load, I'm a hero. Right. If they didn't like the load, I'm a jerk, right?
Yep.
So I know the emotions and the feelings get involved in that. But when you say stuff like that, or you're concerned about your miles, we are going to pull the data, and we're going to pull it for probably a bigger, longer period of time, because we don't want to judge things on what happened last week. The picture is bigger than that.
It's a lot bigger picture.
Yeah, so we need to get a bigger picture. And I don't want a driver to ever think we're not concerned and we're not hearing them. But the reality is we do have to look at things in a little bigger picture. So over the course of the last 6 weeks, you've averaged 2,800 miles a week. That hits your goal. Last week, you were at 1,700. So I get that. That didn't work for you. But overall, you're fine. Right. But there's nothing wrong with talking about that. You got to have those conversations.
No. Kind of where I always go along with the communication. I mean, it's with those guys too. They can't be afraid to ask the questions. We can't be afraid to ask them the questions either. But if they're concerned, I would rather have them ask a question right away and let them, instead of having them build up and stew over it for
absolutely
4,000 miles, because that could be a pretty big issue.
Well, and there's nothing worse than, when you're running a trucking company, that you come in on Monday morning and there's an envelope with some keys in it. Yeah. And you're going, what happened?
Yes.
What happened to this driver? Why would he just walk away, not say anything to anybody? And the reality is that, some of them aren't comfortable talking about it, or maybe they have been talking to you about it and they feel like they haven't been heard. So you're right. The communication is so important, that relationship between you and your driver manager.
Especially if you don't know how to handle that situation. Make sure you get somebody who can step in and handle that, so that you don't walk in the office and have keys sitting on your desk.
I can guarantee you that from an operations standpoint, we would much rather have a discussion with you and figure out how we can work through this issue. And it may be on us, the company. Maybe we aren't getting you the miles that we should. There's nothing wrong with you standing up for yourself as a driver and bringing that to our attention, because just like we were talking about earlier, the chaos that goes on in dispatch and stuff, it's truth. Sometimes you don't have the ability to give everybody the attention that they deserve.
Right.
So don't feel like you can't ever stand up for yourself as a driver and at least discuss
Yes.
it.
And they need to understand too sometimes that I always kind of feel that just because somebody might be busy at that moment in time and you don't feel like you can talk to anybody because there's nobody, everybody's in there talking and nobody was listening to you, maybe try again. Don't be afraid to try again, because you could have walked into a pretty chaotic moment at that moment, at that specific time. So continue that line of communication with your dispatch. We're there to hear you, but we can't hear you if you're not going to speak.
And again, we have the same goals.
Yes, 100%.
All right. One of the things that ticks me off is you send me a load, I do my trip planning for it, and then all of a sudden I get this message that comes across, wait, never mind. Last minute change, something changed. Can't you guys get your act together? What the hell's going on in there?
Probably because something was beyond our control. We may have had somebody else assigned to that load, and we get an email, drivers broke down. A flat tire could take 3 hours or better to probably fix by the time somebody gets out there, gets it changed, gets them going back out on the road again. So we've got to make adjustments where, okay, yeah, we had you on this load. We know you probably loved that load, but now we're in a bad spot where we really need you to get over here and do this for us instead, you know?
We talk about that. I think we have a saying that, it's like building a house of cards every day. You do your best, you make your plan, you assign the loads to the drivers that make sense to do it. One card falls out because of something beyond your control, and then all of a sudden you're right. It's a domino effect. We've got this critical load, needs to load by 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and there's nobody else that can do it. I've got to flip some things around and get you going on it. So the thing I wish dispatch would do is take the extra time. That took 10 seconds, right?
Yes.
To explain that to you, why we're making the change. Yes. And I don't think that happens often enough.
Probably not often enough. The last thing that you want to say, or the last thing a driver probably wants to hear, is because you have to.
Right. Just do what I told you to.
That's a 3-second, basically, too bad, don't care type of an attitude, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Where 10 seconds, like you said, makes a world of explanation to them to help them understand. Now they have a sense of pride because they're actually being able to help probably bail you out of a situation that you might be in.
Yeah.
And those, you remember those things.
I know, one of your roles that you play right now, you do a lot of inbound scheduling for steel products for our manufacturing sites. That's critical. So how important is the driver communication back to dispatch, when things aren't going as planned?
It's very huge. It could shut a plant down. A lot of our loads that we get in might be needed to be picked up and delivered as soon as possible. They could be a 500-mile run. They could be a 1,500-mile run. But we've got to consistently monitor those, or at least I do. I'm getting phone calls. I'll get calls from our buyers or from sometimes 3 different people at one of our plants wanting to know updates on that load. Did it picked up? Hey, they're able to see our system to where they can tell if that driver's been loaded or about where he's at. And if they don't like where he's at, is this accurate? What's going on? So when we're able to if there's an issue that arises and we're able to stay ahead of that and give them the information before they see it, they're a lot happier with that. They know that there's nothing that can be done about it, but at least they're getting that information ahead of time.
Well, and I think, yes, we can track everybody, right? Satellites, whatever. So we've been able to do that for a long time. But the communication's key because it's about giving context about what is actually happening. And it's not just, oh, man, it looks like the truck's running behind. It's about here's why the truck's running behind. So again, you're absolutely right. The customer, the shipper, the receiver, a lot more forgiving if they understand the full picture and what's going on.
Exactly, yes. They're always anticipating, maybe he just broke down or something, but when a driver falls sick, gets just sick as can be, can't focus, I explain to anybody that I got to talk to that, remember last week when you were sick and you spent 3 days at home? This is what he's got now. And he's out on the road. He's not at home. He's in his truck. They don't have the comfort that they would normally have because they're 700 miles away. got to give a little bit of a break to the poor people out there.
Stuck in an 8-foot by 8-foot cab, and the closest restroom might be 100-yard sprint at the rest area type thing. But no, you brought up something else that that made me think, and this is really more for the dispatch type side of things. And I know you'll get this as a customer service type rep. I can't stand when trucking companies make up lies about when something's running behind or not going as planned. Right. You said something about a breakdown. And I think that is the most common excuse that carriers use because, in theory, okay, it's a mechanical breakdown. What did you want me to do? I get it. But by God, don't use it if it's not happening.
Right.
Tell the customer the truth, what's really happening with their load.
And I get the luxury of being able to do that with our plants. Because when I do say something at any specific point in time, they're going to know whatever I'm telling them is the truth. Hey, I got a driver that overslept. You know what? I don't know what's going on. He hasn't started his clock yet. Let me give him a call. Maybe he's, overslept, or you've got to be transparent and honest with everybody that's involved, regardless of the outcome.
So let's wrap this up. I've got one question for you. As a professional in the industry for more than 25 years, as a driver, what makes a driver easy to work with from your point of view?
Personality. Doesn't really matter to me what personality they may have. You get some drivers sometimes that maybe have a drier personality, but it all stems of getting to know them, finding out what makes them tick, what makes them smile, what makes anything, because that makes the difference. Once you get to know them, they get to know you. Everybody feels a lot more comfortable working with each other. Trust.
So as a driver, I need to work at that relationship.
Yeah, I think that you need to understand that we understand your frustrations. As a driver, it's probably hard for you to understand ours, but once you know that individual and get to know them just as much as they're trying to get to know you, that's how you're going to probably make a better bond.
Yeah, and if I think I think we could wrap up with one word that needs to happen between this relationship, the driver and operations person. It's that trust factor.
Yes.
That really makes all the difference in the world.
You have to have it.
Thanks for joining us today.
No, thank you.
Appreciate you.
Anytime.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far. If you're looking for opportunities in trucking, check out our show notes.